glad you're all here to learn about how you can contribute to the Android open source project. My name is Andrea Falcone, and I'm a software engineer. I work on Jetpack, Android Jetpack. And before joining this team at Google, I worked on other developer tools that you might have heard of: Crashlytics, Fabric, Firebase, Fastlane. So working in tools for developers is really my passion. So first of all, what is AOSP? Why does it matter, and why would you even want to contribute to it? So AOSP is the Android open source project. And this is sort of all of the things that go into Android and the parts that are available to external contributors for contributing and for viewing as well. There's code, not just source code for the platform, but also for all of the libraries that are available as part of Android, and the tools that we use to build those libraries, and the tools that we use to build the tools. So there's a lot that's included as part of the project. So what is Jetpack? Is anyone here familiar with Jetpack? Android? A couple people. All right, so a brief overview. Jetpack is a set of libraries that are shipped separate of the Android platform. And the reason for this is that when they're included in your app, you can update to the latest versions that we're continuously doing releases. You don't have to depend on platform features in order to take advantage of new features or for bug fixes. We ship any libraries that are ready to go every 2 weeks. And so that doesn't mean every library ships every 2 weeks, but libraries have the opportunity to ship that often. The reason I'm going to talk a lot about Jetpack today is not only because that's what I work on, but it's easier to get started contributing to Jetpack because it's primarily developed in the open. The tools are also more similar to what other Android developers are using. So we build with Gradle as opposed to other projects inside of Google, which build using Blaze. And it's written in Kotlin, or a lot of it's written in Kotlin, which is exciting because that's where we're all moving towards. Speaking of Kotlin and Gradle, our build system for Jetpack, which is primarily what I work on, is all written in Gradle. So instead of massive Groovy scripts, we have massive Kotlin scripts that interact with the Gradle DSL. It's more enjoyable to work on that, and we can take advantage of some great Kotlin language features, which is a lot of fun. So what does it mean to contribute? To be part of the Android open source project is to have some impact on it. And that can mean a lot of different things, as we'll talk about today. The process of contributing to AOSP is the following. You probably need to find a bug that you're actually going to fix. You can't just jump in and start writing new features and new libraries. We're not ready for contributors at that level at this point. You need to download the source code. That's also important. You need to actually be able to browse it and to edit it. And you'll need to be able to upload those changes as well. And we use tools that probably are not familiar to most folks, and that's sort of the purpose of the talk, is to get you familiar with the tools that we use so that you can make a successful contribution. So before we talk about contributing code, we should talk about bugs, though, because this is super important. Issue Tracker is the tool that we use for public bug tracking. We actually also have an internal version of it that we use for all internal bug tracking as well. But there's different ways that you can interact with Issue Tracker. So you might be using it to find specific bugs. Maybe you're just looking to see, is there a known issue? Is there something that is affecting other users? You might be finding it, or you might be looking in Issue Tracker to file new bugs. We have, every time someone interacts with the libraries or the platform, there's an opportunity for someone to find an issue and to file it. And that part of contributing is really great for the ecosystem because we have that many people's eyes and ears and fingers interacting with it. So we do appreciate the community when they're filing bugs as well. So in Android X, or Jetpack, we have what we call a bug bounty. This is a list of bugs that we want help with. They're either not necessarily low-hanging fruit, but things that we don't necessarily have time to work on, but we would like to be fixed. This list is internal and external, so it's a way for other developers at Google who are not part of the Android team to be able to contribute to Jetpack. But a bunch of the issues on here are public as well, and this is a place where you as external contributors can go and find bugs that already have a sponsor. They're things that we know we want people to work on. You can look at known issues. At the bottom of one of the docs pages, there's a place, this guy here, you can report bugs I'm standing in front of. You can find a link to all of the top-level components for bugs that can be filed or fixed. When you go and find an issue, starring it is really important. If you come across something that someone else has logged, adding the star is the way to say that it's impacting you as well. And teams inside Google use the number of stars on issues, so these are cumulative. We use that number of stars to figure out if something is impacting a large number of people and to help prioritize them. So it's super important just to add that +1 on there as well. Cool. So you can go ahead and file a new bug if you haven't found one that matches what you're running into. It's important to get it into the right component so that it gets automatically routed to the right team. If you file a bug against the wrong component, someone might say, like, that doesn't make any sense, and ignore it. So if you end up, if you put it in the right component, then it will get to the right team. There's default assignees for issues, so it'll get routed to the team and it can be triaged. So you can type anything in that box. Android is probably not the best thing to type in there. Maybe Work Manager, View Pager 2, like something you're specifically looking for. Issues in Issue Tracker, the components come with a template, so it can tell you what that team is looking for specifically. Maybe file or add a sample project that demonstrates the issue, demonstrates the bug, and some information about versions and other things that are important. Each component is slightly different for what's in the template, but you'll see it when you get there. And there's even a link that says, find recent issues. Where you're going to file a bug, it's like, hey, hold on, have you really looked? Make sure someone hasn't already filed that. Duplicates can be difficult to detect. People's wording, the way they describe a bug is different. And so it's best if we get more stars on fewer issues, then we can prioritize those. So I've talked a lot about bugs. Filing bugs might be the only contribution or the biggest contribution that you make to the Android open source project, and that's okay. That's awesome. If everyone filed bugs that they found, we'd have fewer bugs, and that would be great. But some people say, oh, I don't know, is it a bug? Maybe it's already known, I'm sure they'll fix it. Maybe we have no idea. We need help. So please interact with the issue tracker and file bugs, star them, etc. Okay, so enough about bugs. Let's talk about writing some code. So the process, referring back to what we talked about earlier, the process for contributing, we're going to need to figure out what it is we're going to fix. We're going to need to get the code. We're going to need to upload it, and not profit, but we'll get there. So the first thing that we need to do is to get the tool that we use for getting the code. You might say, isn't that Git? Not quite. The Android open source platform uses a tool called Repo, which really wraps up a bunch of Git repos. And it uses this file called a manifest. So looks a little scary, but this is all of the Git repositories that are required for building, I believe in this case, it's just all of Jetpack. And so we have dependencies on other binaries, we have dependencies on other source projects, and this tool wraps them all up. And so as an external contributor, you can pretend like you never saw this, but it's nice to peek under the hood sometimes and understand what tools are doing. So Repo uses Repo Manifest. So in order to get repo, the only way to do it is to curl this random URL. So, sorry. But once it's downloaded and installed, it will keep itself up to date every time you run it, which is great. So you curl that, then you run the next command, and you'll get the latest version of repo always, which is great. So once we run repo init, once we get repo, we can run the first command, which is called repo init, and we run that against a manifest URL. That tells basically which project are we going to interact with. We don't have a mono repo in the sense that there are separate checkouts for the platform, for different versions, historical versions of the Android OS, for Jetpack, and so init tells you which one you're going to point to. Then you sync. That actually downloads the code once it's configured. And repo start is sort of like checking out a new branch. And then upload is finally how the code actually makes it to our code review tool. And I have a sneaky little note about all the hard work actually happens in between those two steps. That's where the coding happens. We'll get there. So as I mentioned, the manifest URL tells you which code actually is going to get checked out. For the purposes of this talk, we're going to be using Android X master dev. That is where all of the Jetpack libraries are developed in the open on master. It's a little bit complicated to keep the difference between a repo and a branch in your head. I've recently even myself run into struggles where I need to create a new repo to build something, and I'm working with the team who make sure that we don't have duplicates of stuff. And there's like, you've already got that. I'm like, well, that's the source. I need a repo where I'm gonna build it, and there's some back and forth. And so it's a little bit complicated. The point is that a repo is what code, and branch is branch is what we all know branch is. Why do we develop on Android X master dev for Jetpack? I have no idea. So once we figure out the right code, we need to actually download it so we can use repo sync. What repo sync is actually doing is a little bit complicated. So it's going to do git remote update and then rebase. So it's going to pull down the changes and put yours on top of them automatically. That way you're not doing the pull and the rebase on your own. We expect everyone to always be rebased on master using this tool. The checkout can be pretty large, something to think about, making sure that you are able to develop on the machine. So Jetpack checkout, 7 gigs, still pretty big. It's not as big as checking out the entire Android platform. I can develop on Jetpack using my 13-inch MacBook. It's a little slow, but it's totally possible. But the majority of engineers working on this full-time do use a high-powered Linux desktop. If you want to make sync run faster, you can add more threads. Basically, just parallelize this to speed it up. Okay, we've gotten the code. We've gotten as far as getting the code. Super. The next step is to repo start, which checks out a new branch, puts you on that branch, and gets you ready to go. It also does some other things under the hood. So it's really important to do repo start first, and I can show you in a minute how to get out of a situation where you haven't done it first. If you've committed onto master, things get a little weird. In our checkout, we also have a script that will allow you to run Android Studio. The reason that we have this is because there's often a specific version of Studio that's required for building Jetpack libraries. And running GradleW Studio will ensure that you have downloaded, installed, and are launching the correct version. I don't know about you, but I often have a lot of green Android Studio icons, and a yellow one sometimes, but a lot of green ones, different versions of Android Studio for different projects. And I get in a situation where I've launched the wrong one and I can't understand why it doesn't open the project I'm trying to work on. GradleW Studio will get you out of that Caveat being, if you don't have the right version of Studio, it's going to download it for you. Every time you run the script, it's going to check to make sure you have it and download it. So if you are network constrained or disk space constrained, that can be challenging, but it's something to be aware of. This will help you stay in a good state for development. Right, so we use Gradle to build, as I mentioned, which is super because you're all familiar with it. Downside is it's a little on the slow side. You can run assemble on the entire project. That's all of the Jetpack libraries. It's something like 100 artifacts that get shipped. And you can run test. We also have a custom task called build on server, and this is what our CI does. It builds every single Jetpack library and the tests for them and the test apps for them and the documentation in Kotlin and Java for all of them, and runs Jacoco and Czech style and lint. So it's massive, but it's the thing that ensures that the code is all in a good state. I recommend that you run build on server on your machine before contributing. On my trusty MacBook, it does take almost an hour to run, which is annoying. Go to lunch, run it before lunch. One reason that I recommend that you run it on your machine rather than just submitting the code and hoping that everything builds fine is that, unfortunately, at this time, the build failure reports are not available to external contributors. So you can see that it failed, but you can't see why. And that's something that we are working on. We have a team of folks that are trying to put all the right buttons and permissions to get those results viewable externally. But in the meantime, the recommendation is to run this first so that you have a much, much better chance of your pre-submit testing passing. OK, so chances are you're probably just working in a single library, though. Maybe fixing a bug in one of these libraries. You're not necessarily making overarching changes. For me, when I'm working on this, I'm working on the build script that builds every library. And so the chance of me screwing it up because I'm touching every library is pretty high, and so I run build on server constantly. But if you're just working on a single library, you can build much more quickly using assemble and test on those specific libraries. And it's also possible to run the tests in Android Studio, which might be more comfortable, or allow you to debug more easily. It's more like how you would actually do development. OK. So the reason that you made these changes, you're in here fixing bugs, is probably because they impact an app that you're working on. You're not just fixing random bugs for funsies, I don't think. If you are, awesome. But it's probably something that's impacting an app that you're working on. And it would be great if you tested that in your app to make sure the fix actually fixes the problem that you're running into. So the way to do that is to run a task called create archive. What create archive does is creates a Maven repository locally within the build source directory for the checkout. And then you can change the version number to whatever the latest version number of the library is that you have locally. And then your app is going to point to the code that was just built, the Jetpack libraries that were just built at the latest version. So pretty simple. And like I said, it's important to test in your app because you're the one that knows the problem that you're fixing. OK, we're done coding. I hope that we can ship this. Unfortunately, there's a few steps between here and there. You need to create a Garrett password. You need to be able to log in to Garrett, which is our code review system. After that, you need to sign the CLA. It's like 4 pages long. Click all the boxes, lots of different colors. OK, I think it's possible we can ship the code now. We will find out. All right, so just like we do with Git status, what have I changed? All right, I'll add all the files. I will commit message, fixing a bug, which is exactly what we all make all of our commit messages. Perfect. OK, then I'm going to repo upload. I want to send my code to the stars. Here it goes. First, we need to talk about script hooks. you'll be prompted the first time you run upload to run the script hooks every time. Your project may already include Git hooks. You have commit hooks, you have upload hooks. There's different points in time when Git can say, hang on, run this other code before doing this step. In this case, the script hooks do a couple of important things. They inject a change ID into the commit message, which is the only way that your code will be allowed to be uploaded. It has to have a change ID included in it. And it runs some code formatting, check style, lint type things as well. The change ID is, like I said, critical to uploading code, and so you have to run the script hooks. Okay, so I go to upload, and it fails. Some of the things that the checks are also looking at is the commit message. Does it adhere to the format that is specified? You need to say how the changes were tested. That could be a sentence, that could be a Gradle command, that could be I ran this in Studio. You need to have something in the test stanza in your commit message. Okay, so I'm going to amend my commit message to add that. So I'm going to add tested and the command that I ran. All right. An important note. Unlike with other tools where you might commit something, realize you need to make a change, add the files, commit again, add the files, commit again, with Garrett, you only ever have a single commit. The difference between that commit at the time that you push it is tracked, but you have to always amend the commit that you are working on that branch. Okay, so I mentioned the change ID. After I've successfully committed, the change ID is added automatically to the message. Okay, so earlier I mentioned I forgot to repo, what would happen, there's a situation if you don't repo start, you're gonna run into problems. This is basically how you get out of that situation. You have to take the commit off of master, repo start, get on the right branch, and then get that commit back onto the branch that was repo started. Not super complicated, but if you're not used to this workflow, it could be a problem for you. Okay, maybe this time our upload will work. Unfortunately, there were some check style problems. Some of them can be fixed automatically for you, so if you've got trailing white space, or you've got semicolons, or missing semicolons, or you've got some problems, they can often be automatically fixed, and you'll get a little note at the bottom that tells you how to automatically fix them. Okay, finally, I fixed all my problems, and I was able to upload my change. There it is, the URL right there. You can click on it, copy paste it in the terminal, and that's a link to a CL. So what's a CL, you might ask? It's like a PR, but we have different words. A CL is a change list. It really just means the same thing. And I also mentioned before that there's the delta between the commit when it is pushed. We call that a patch set. So you make changes, upload them. You make more changes, you amend that same commit, and you upload it. You'll have two patch sets, and you'll be able to, in Garrett, look at the difference between them. But they're called patch sets, they're not commits in Garrett. Okay, here it is. It's a wonderful beast, Garrett. It's a web-based tool for doing code reviews in the Android system. Because AOSP houses a lot of different projects, if you just look at the top level, you're going to see a lot of different things. You're seeing the repos and the branches that I mentioned earlier, so you can see where teams are doing their work. Repository is often the name of the project, and the branch can be anything from master to very specific bug fix or a release in time. Okay, so this is the details of a single CL. There's a lot to look at here. The important things are reviewers and pre-submit. So like all code review systems, you need someone to actually review the code. And so we'll talk in a minute about actually finding them. Pre-submit is the CI testing that happens before you're submitting. You're also seeing Any other requirements? Different projects have different requirements. In this case, at this time, when I took the screenshot, the build may have been closed, and so it's possible that you need a build cop, someone who has the approval to override the merging at this point in time. And this list can be long and vary for different projects. You've got the description and the change ID right up at the top. Okay. It's important to write good commit messages because that is what people are going to see. There isn't a separate place. Often with GitHub, you can like copy and paste in images and do it like Markdown and cool stuff. You need your commit message to be the right thing. It can't just be fixing a bug because that's what all of your reviewers are going to see. So make sure you include the bug that you're fixing, the test stanza. Be specific. Explain why you're making the fix, not just what it does, but why you needed to do that. And try not to be vague. You're much less likely to get reviews if people don't understand what the code that they're about to review is. Okay, so to find reviewers, there's a button on the top that says Find Owners. That pops up a screen that shows you people who have access or the ability to give a +1 or +2. You want a +2. And anyone who has recently edited this file as well. So some combination of those, you'll be able to find the right people. You should pick 2 in case the first one totally ignores you. Keep clicking that button. You don't want to pick more than that because it'll be spammy and people will say, oh, somebody else has it, right? If there's a bunch of other people on there, yeah, one of those people has it. And if it's 1, they could ignore you. So pick 2. It's a perfect number. That person is super important because they need to shepherd your change through the system. They need to provide you with code review feedback. They need to actually initiate the pre-submit. That's something that external contributors can't do currently, which we're working on changing. We want you to be able to hit the pre-submit testing button. And they're going to actually merge the code in for you. So you want to find somebody good. Great. So the process of reviewing, there's obviously comments, as with other code review systems. Comments are in draft form until they are published. And so that's important to note. They don't immediately go out, so you can accumulate a bunch of comments. You can mark them resolved, but you need to hit reply at the end of commenting on the comment, replying to the comments, whatever. You need to actually hit reply so that the comments are sent to the reviewer. If you just leave them, they're in draft, they'll never see them. Okay. It can get a little bit crazy if you've got 10, 20 comments from a reviewer. You have replies to them. Some of them you haven't marked resolved. There's a couple of checkboxes that will help you find anything that's remaining open. You must resolve all of the comments prior to it being merged. So it's really important to make sure that you get to any unresolved comments and close them. Okay. So the reviewer has done their job. You've gone back and forth with them. It's ready to submit. Except for you can't submit it because you're an external contributor. And I'm sorry, the button is there. But eventually, the person who shepherded your change is going to merge it for you. And it will say merged. And it'll be very happy and awesome. Great. Okay, so that was a lot. I tried to mention along the way each problem that you might run into. We want more contributors, and we're trying to make it an easier process. Recently, when I took a look at the numbers since, what was it this time? Since September last year, this is how many external versus internal contributors we've had. So about 10% external. It would be great if that was a much higher number. So what do we need to do to get there? We need to fix some of the issues that we acknowledge are problems. There's a version of this doc internally where teams and owners and people have commented on each of these known issues. These are things that we want to change. we want you to be able to initiate the pre-submit testing. We want you to be able to see the build failures. All of these things are not the best. Some other issues that I think even my own team struggles with is that it's not the default to log bugs externally. We go to the same tool, we call it Buganizer internally, it's issue tracker externally. We open that tool and its issues are not automatically public. And when we work on a team where our code is by nature or by default public, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So we file bugs and you can't see them, which is a bummer. So we're working on getting bugs to be filed automatically in the public, and a number of other issues as well. So I have some tools or some resources so that your contributions can be successful. You want to make sure that the style, whether you're writing in Java or Kotlin, we have libraries that are in both right now and trending towards Kotlin. Make sure the style matches with the rest of the library, as well as what are the Java and Kotlin style guidelines. I'm really excited to be talking about this. I'm excited to share the work that we're doing on Jetpack and on Android in general with more external contributors. I think the more people we have, the more eyes we have, the better product we're going to make. These slides are available at that URL, so you can access them. You can click on all the links, everything that I shared with you. And we're just super excited. We want to see more people in our code base. So thanks a bunch. I'm glad you're all here, made it through the day. And I was told to remind you to rate my session on the Codemotion app. So thank you.